Um, so I'm Andrew Gould, and I specialize in architectural design for Orthodox churches. I think most of you are somewhat familiar with my work. So I've been here for 2 days now studying your property, and I'm very enthusiastic about the building that you've been given. It's a really, really beautiful and charming structure. It would be almost impossible to build a structure quite as nice as that nowadays. Solid brick with 16-inch thick walls. It's just something really special. It's very beautifully detailed. And I think the character of it is very well suited to an Orthodox church. It's also the perfect size for a parish. It's big enough to hold about 150 people, and everywhere I go, Orthodox priests tell me that that's as big as a parish church ought to be. So I think it's really quite perfect for you, and it's in very good condition. I come from a city, Charleston, South Carolina, where the whole city is a historic district, so nothing can be torn down, and a lot of what I do is work on restoring old buildings, and almost everything is in infinitely worse condition than that building. That building would be considered almost excellent move-in condition by Charleston standards. So you've really got all you need there. It's what you have on that property right now is as much as pretty much any Russian parish church ever has. If you visit a little town in Russia and look at their church, they've got a churchyard with a somewhat run-down antique building on it, and no bathrooms and no electricity and no heating system, and that's all they've ever had for hundreds of years, and probably all they ever will have, and that's considered all an Orthodox parish should have. So I want you to think of that church as being already your church and already everything you need, and anything more that you're going to build there in terms of parish hall, bathrooms, and so forth. These are modern American luxuries that you can have if you want to pay for them. And yeah, I understand practically that you need these things, but I think it's important to keep grounded in the reality that you haven't been given a sort of ruinous halfway church. You've been given a whole church. You've been given everything you really need, and it needs some cleaning up and decorating inside. But that's kind of the fun part. That's the easy part to raise money for. So I'll talk a little bit about my vision for the property. In terms of the church itself, I think it's in your interest to keep it as intact as possible in terms of its current configuration. Any attempt to cut additional doors into the building and add bathrooms and so forth is going to reduce the usability of the building. It's going to reduce the amount of functional space where people can stand and where furniture can go. I think that the long-term viability of it as your parish church is going to be best if it's just basically kept the way it is, in terms of everybody enters through the front door and the side rooms at the back simply remain sacristy space. And if you keep it like that, it really is big enough to be a permanent parish church. There's no difficulty getting handicapped access through the front door. It's only 2 feet above the grade right now, and the grade is kind of a low spot in front of the church, so it's simply a matter of raising up the dirt a little bit in front of the church and creating kind of a level courtyard space that goes all the way back to the cemetery and the road, which is already up on higher ground, and then we can get everything up to a single level where all the buildings will just be at grade entrances. And the parish hall should go in front of the church. That basically you would come right out the front door of the church and you'd walk across a courtyard garden and right into the parish hall, and the parish hall would extend off to the right, so the church and the parish hall would be at 90 degrees to one another, and would frame a courtyard in between, with the road over here and the cemetery over there. And that has a whole bunch of advantages. It has the topographic advantage that it's already high ground, so you don't need to be putting your parish hall down the hill and have all kinds of zigzag handicapped ramps between them. And it has the advantage that it puts your outdoor space, your courtyard, in front of the church. So you can be dining in the parish hall and you can enjoy looking at the front of the church with the southern sunlight illuminating it and create an extremely beautiful sort of forecourt formal garden between the two buildings. And you can have outdoor dining there, which relieves some of the pressure of having a huge parish hall where everybody can dine inside. And then in terms of parking, I'm not convinced you really need to build a huge parking lot. I think you can string out cars along that driveway parallel to the cemetery from the parish hall all the way down to the old priest's grave, and that'll get you quite a considerable number of cars just pulling right off the driveway, and there's opportunity elsewhere in the site to park additional cars that we can look at the numbers for that. But again, keeping your site intact and as beautiful as possible is what's going to make it, give it the most utility. I always advocate quality over quantity. You've already got a quality building there, and if you keep working with that level of quality, you'll find that you don't need all that much space. People tend to get fed up about not having enough space when it's an ugly building, an ugly space, and people tend to be very tolerant of being close together and standing outside when it's crowded and that kind of thing, when everything is beautiful. We see this in Europe, where old buildings tend to be small and everything's crowded and everything's beautiful and people are very happy, compared to America, where everything's huge and everything's very convenient and everybody drives 40 minutes to get anywhere and everybody's angry and says they need more space. So think about it in the old-fashioned European way: everything quality, everything beautiful, and not everybody needs to sit down and eat at exactly the same time. Some people can wait outside, some people can eat first if it's a crowded day, and it'll really be just fine because it's beautiful. So I think the parish hall doesn't need to be enormous. I think you can have a dining space for maybe 75 people inside. You can have picnic tables for more people outside. You can have some movable partitions that open and close up classrooms as needed. When high attendance days tend to be days when you don't have Sunday school, major feasts and bishops' visit and so forth, so you can open up classrooms as more dining space. The highest attendance days tend to be days when you don't have coffee hour at all, like Christmas morning, or they tend to be during more temperate seasons, spring and fall, like Pascha, where it's more reasonable to use outdoor space. You tend not to have maximum attendance when it's pouring rain or when it's a horrible cold winter day. So, my experience with churches that have a beautiful property is they can make a lot of use of their outdoor land on high attendance days. Now, talking about the interior of the chapel, having sat in there for a number of hours and contemplated all the possibilities for how the inside can be treated, my ultimate proposal is essentially to keep some of the tin, but not most of it. Basically, I think the tin ceiling is worth keeping because it's a rather beautiful ceiling, and it would be horrendously expensive to replace that ceiling. And I think you can keep the tin in the narthex because the narthex looks rather pretty as it is right now. But I think you should take the tin off of the walls, and including in the altar, and plaster those walls, and that will greatly improve the acoustics in there, and it'll give you space for frescoes in the future. The building appears originally to have had a wainscoting up to the windowsill level because there was never any plaster there, so that can be restored to being a wooden wainscot. And then we can build a very beautiful 3-tier iconostasis that would be kind of in a style of arts and crafts Victorian woodwork to match the woodwork on the front of the church. Sand down the floor and restore the original heart pine and build the iconostasis from the same kind of wood. And then we can paint the tin ceiling kind of a mixture of dark brown and amber colors in a beautiful decorative design, so the ceiling becomes very warm and reflects the wood elsewhere in the building. And replace the 6 light fixtures with big ring-shaped iron chandeliers in a medieval style, and it'll be spectacularly beautiful. It won't look anything like the sort of whitewashed, vaguely Protestant American appearance that the church currently has. It'll be all woods and rich and an interior golden light with the kind of Orthodox character of liturgical light that we like to see, of having big chandeliers with very low wattage bulbs with an amber light reflecting off of a tall iconostasis with gilded icons. It'll have a tremendously Orthodox ethos, just because of how we'll be handling the plaster textures and the reflection of light off of the wood and the icons. And it'll also make a big difference to replace the rose window over the entry door with a more Byzantine style of glazing, which would be blown glass rondelles out of clear glass that let sunbeams through, and so you'll get a beautiful shaft of light coming in that'll be visible through the incense and sparkle off of the icons. And I have a lot of experience with working with lighting and chandeliers and window replacements and so forth in churches to achieve this beautiful Orthodox light that you see in medieval buildings in the old world, and that's really a key is light and colors. The architecture is already great. It's not so much a problem with the building. The building's fine. It's just a matter of textures and light and glass and furniture, that sort of thing, is what's going to really make this spectacularly beautiful inside.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about any of that I can elaborate on?
Would we be working on both things simultaneously, the parish hall and the church?
Well, my recommendation is to go ahead and get the parish hall designed, and try to get that under construction. So if you're able to raise the money or borrow the money to do that, we might imagine it's going to be about a year of design and planning and financing for the parish hall, and then maybe a year of construction. So maybe 2 years from now, that building would be done. And at that point, I think you should start having services in the church. Obviously, there's a few things you need to do to be able to have services routinely in the church. There's some holes in the floor that need to be patched, and you need to, get a safe entry into the front door and that sort of thing. But beyond that, I think you can really start moving into the church, and it may take a number of additional years to completely renovate the church, as in getting everything plastered and getting a heating system installed and so forth. But I think you'll find that the money kind of turns up for those things very quickly. I think once you've got a parish hall with bathrooms and you're on the property and you're holding services in there, the money to do the sort of icing on the cake stuff, like getting the walls plastered and getting the building heated, that's money that's going to be very easy to raise. But yeah, I think you should get in there, and there'll be days when it's freezing cold and you have to have the service in the parish hall. But I think with some creativity, with electric space heaters and so forth, you can use that building relatively soon.
How long is any individual war zone period when a major thing is going on with the church? Like, how long does that usually? I mean, there's no prediction, I guess, depending on the season.
Well, I don't think they would take very long. So yeah, if you're lucky, you'll be able to raise enough money while you're building the parish hall to do some of that major work simultaneous with the parish hall construction. It'd be really nice if you can get the foundation stuff and the crawl space work done while the parish hall is being built, and then it's done. But if you're not lucky with fundraising in that way, and you have to move into the church before that work is done, then at some point you'll have to move back out while they tear up the floor and mess with the crawl space. But those kinds of things don't take very long. A few weeks probably. They're not. These kinds of things, they may look expensive, but they're not like building a whole building that takes 6 months. They're things that they go in and out pretty quickly.
So would you do the design for the, entrance and the raising of the berm and berming and all that
Yeah.
as part of building the parish hall?
It
so
has
that
to, it has
it's
to
all-
be, yeah.
It's related,
Yeah, cause when you, when you're restoring an old building, you can do things piecemeal like you've been doing, but when you build a new building, the authorities don't let you do it piecemeal. You have to have a complete plan that includes all the civil engineering, meaning you have to show how all the topography is going to be, you have to show where all the parking is going to be, you have to show where all the water is going to drain, how all of the utility pipes are going to run. It basically, you have to have 100% complete plan that leaves your property all landscaped, all the grass planted, all of the drainage systems functioning, and they're not going to give you a certificate of occupancy until 100% of that is done. So yeah, by necessity, the parish hall construction is going to have to include everything relating to grading, parking, drainage, site lighting, whatever the authorities require for civil engineering, site work kind of stuff. So really the only thing that is going to be left undone that you can do piecemeal in the future is going to be stuff on the old building, mainly interior stuff, because you've already done the exterior.
For anybody who's familiar with the building, anybody who's familiar with the building, think of those doors, the inside front doors that are blonde in these, the boards go this way, go diagonal toward the down, and they're blonde, and then the framework is brown. And he was talking about doing ceiling stuff in connection to that, like
Yeah.
those ribbed parts, you're thinking dark, and then in the middle is the some combination of that color and whatever the heart pine color is.
Yeah, so basically everything in an Orthodox church should look warm. So I thought those doors were a great inspiration to a color scheme for all of the old tin work, where basically it would be a mixture of different light ambers and dark woody browns, and I would paint all of that tin in a somewhat shiny paint. I've seen old buildings that have tin ceilings, and they should be painted with shiny paint, because once you have your chandeliers in there with hundreds of little low wattage light bulbs, the sparkle of that light off of all of the ornament on the tin, painted in warm amber colors and shiny paint, will look unbelievably beautiful. It'll be
Psalm 19.
Picture, I'm sure you can all picture, the classic Byzantine churches in Constantinople where the ceilings are all gold mosaic. You can get a somewhat reminiscent effect with a tin ceiling that's kind of painted a yellowish ochre color with shiny paint. I think you'll be amazed you'll be amazed what a liturgical ethos that tin is capable of giving if it's painted and illuminated in the right way.
We'll need a local architect, we understand.
Yeah, I can do drawings in terms of designing buildings and so forth, but you'll have to have a local architect to shepherd this process through the authorities, to coordinate with the civil engineer and all of the local agencies that handle drainage and parking and building code stuff. That it's just impractical to do that from a distance. You'll have to have a local architect to really be in charge of the whole building coordination and permitting process, and to assist you with getting bids from contractors to do the work.
Will you be able to help us find that person, or just a combination of whatever, prayer and?
Well, I can make some inquiries with people I know in DC, but you might do better making local inquiries here, because I don't know anyone right in this area.
Do you have any ways we can find an architect in this area easier than it would be to just look around for a while?
Well, if you can find another project that someone else has done that seems similar to your project, That is to say, a project that involves, you know, renovating a historic building and building a new building. It doesn't necessarily have to be a church. It could be like a museum house, some historic properties. You could talk to the National Registry people, the Prince George's County historic people. You know, say, you know, do you know of any architects who, you know, have done stuff like this, work on a historic property with an old building, where they're building a new building, and, you know, I'm sure you can get all sorts of advice that way.
Actually, now that you mention it, the Philip Helly report did recommend a few.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
we-
and
we'll
so
be able to-
you know, you'll want to find somebody who is sensitive to historic architecture and who's willing to work with me. You know, some architects will only do something if it's entirely their own work. But usually I've found that architects are quite willing to work with me on these kinds of things. It's not uncommon for projects to have a design architect and an architect of record in that way. It's actually very common for specialized projects. For instance, like hospital and educational buildings, they invariably have two architects. They'll always have an architect who just knows how to design, you know, hospital building interiors or university classroom interiors. And then they'll have another architect who's just the local guy who does the grunt work of getting it all permitted and stuff. So that's pretty common with a specialized project to have a designer and an architect of record.
Well, could you say a word about Ludwig II and what he came up with that would enable us to, a kind of plaster that we're thinking to use together with the kind of iconography that would go into it?
Sure. Well, there exists a system of plaster and mural paint called the paint is called silicate paint, and that's what I'm recommending for your iconography. The history of it is that in the 1850s, King Ludwig of Bavaria, the so-called Mad King Ludwig, he was building Neuschwanstein Castle, that castle that sort of looks very much like the Disneyland castle, and he wanted to have exterior frescoes on it, like castles in Italy. And the painters told him, you can't do exterior frescoes in Germany, it's too wet. It'll get ruined. So he ordered his scientists to invent a system of paint that would allow him to paint frescoes on the outside of buildings. And they came up with the idea of using this strange chemical called water glass. It's a chemical that was known to the medieval alchemists. It's a potassium silicate solution that when it dries it turns into glass. So they had the idea that you could use lime plaster that's got silica sand in it, and you could then mix your pigments with water glass solution and paint as though you're doing a fresco on this plaster. And as the solution dries, the glass binds the pigment onto the sand grains of the plaster absolutely permanently and totally water fast. And this turned out to be a very successful invention. So if you go to cities like Munich or Prague, and you see all of these Victorian buildings that have murals on the exterior, those were all painted in this silicate paint, and they're all in perfect condition 150 years later. And over the last 30 years or so, this system of paint has become really popular for iconography. So nowadays in both Greece and Russia, this is quite normative for interiors of Orthodox churches to have the murals painted in this way. And it's very fast and efficient. And the nice thing is they're so perfectly waterproof that you can clean them. So over the years, as the walls get sooted up from the candles, you can go back and scrub them with soap and water and refresh them like new without losing any paint. So anyway, this system